Hello everyone, welcome to the Tim Booker channel. By listening to books, we open the door to wealth. Here, we share profound insights and perspectives on wealth, wisdom and the power of money, wishing you the path to prosperity. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with your friends. This way, we can continue to bring you more valuable content and allow more people to benefit from this precious book. Wishing you an enjoyable listening experience. The book we will interpret for you in this episode is, Do You Talk Funny? First of all, I must confess that I approached this book with a learning attitude because I always felt that humor was innate. Being someone like me with no sense of humor seemed hopeless. If you share this sentiment, then this book is undoubtedly good news. It will tell you that humor is a skill that can be trained. By learning the methods, you can also become an engaging speaker. To clarify, the author doesn't mean how to be funny and humorous in everyday life, but rather how to use humor techniques specifically in the context of public speaking to make your presentations more engaging. The author of this book, David Nihill, is a stand-up comedian, which is something you probably wouldn't expect. David used to suffer from glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, to the extent that every time he went on stage, he wanted to find a hole to hide in. He messed up 3 important opportunities in his life due to this fear. Later, by a stroke of luck, he forced himself to do humor exercises for a whole year and ended up becoming a stand-up comedy expert. He has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. He even started a humor communication workshop to help others develop the ability to make their speeches more engaging. From his own experiences, David concluded that humor can help you overcome fear and improve the effectiveness of your speeches. For ordinary people, the best way to train their sense of humor in public speaking is to learn from stand-up comedians. David found that many successful speakers use similar techniques to stand-up comedians when telling jokes. Based on classic theories from stand-up comedy and his practical experience, he distilled 7 most effective principles, which he shares with you in this book. I've divided these principles into 2 parts, preparation off stage and performance on stage. In this episode, I'll first discuss these 2 aspects and explain the author's viewpoints. However, after reading this book, I was left with a question. Although David's 7 principles all make sense, except for the second one, the others don't seem directly related to being funny. I consulted some people about this, and the conclusion was that I might not fully understand humor, so in the third part, I'll make a supplement and share my perspective on humor with you. Alright, let's move on to the first part. When it comes to humor, many people may first think of some witty quotes. The British writer Oscar Wilde, the king of witty remarks, had a great sense of humor when it came to marriage. For example, what is the main reason for divorce? Marriage itself. However, if you suddenly tell this quote to a colleague without providing context, will they laugh? Probably not. This is the first principle that author David wants to tell you: put humor in the story. He says that the laughter he receives on stage often comes from real-life stories rather than carefully crafted puns. Master storyteller Robert McKee also said that storytelling is a creative transformation of life. Interesting stories use humor to achieve this creative transformation. Let's give you an example. I once heard a speech with the topic of emotional management. The speaker wanted to convey a message to the audience. In the past, there was a common misconception that physical injuries are illnesses, but psychological injuries are just a sign of weakness, so people didn't pay much attention to their mental health. However, instead of directly stating this point, he wrapped it in a story. He said, "Growing up with my twin brother, as twins, you quickly become an expert on noticing preferences. Even if my brother's cookie was slightly bigger than mine, would question it. Then, he added, of course, my parents never starved me." At this point, the audience burst into laughter. He then interpreted the idea of valuing physical health but not mental health as another form of preference. This personal touch and humorous approach made the core message, which is the importance of mental health, more relatable and enjoyable for the audience. After laughing, the audience is more likely to resonate with his message. You might say that telling a personal story doesn't necessarily guarantee humor. You are right, not all stories are inherently funny. To make a story funny, you need to follow the second principle that David tells us: humor requires skill. This skill can be broken down into 2 steps: finding funny stories and making them funnier. How to find funny stories? Well, something that went wrong, a mishap, is more likely to become your treasure. So, here's a formula to evaluate good material for humor. Humor equals tragedy multiplied by time. What does it mean? Well, someone asked a stand-up comedian, "Do you guys turn the unfortunate things that happen in life into jokes?" He replied, "Not yet, but eventually." Unfortunate events may not be funny on the spot, but with time, you can see them from a detached or even self-deprecating perspective, making them potential humor material. In life, there are inevitably some annoying incidents. After being upset or angry, don't forget to take note of them. Who knows, one day they might become material for your speeches. Next, your task is to make the selected stories funnier according to the needs of your speech. Let's introduce you to the second classic formula: comedy equals setup plus punchline. The punchline is not about suddenly blurting out a joke that may not be funny. Instead, it's about hitting the audience's funny bone unexpectedly. To achieve this effect, you need to shatter the interest and expectations you deliberately built up. That's where setup comes in. From setting up to delivering the punchline, there's a crucial element called suspense. If you are not delivering a speech live, it might be difficult to directly feel the suspense. So David provides an extreme example in his book. The former president of Kimberly-Clark, the parent company of Huggies, was giving a speech to the company's employees. His first line was, "All right, everyone please stand up for a moment of mourning." The audience must have been puzzled, thinking someone had died. After a few minutes of silence, the speaker said, "We were mourning for Procter & Gamble." The audience immediately burst into laughter because Procter & Gamble is a world-renowned consumer goods company and a competitor of Kimberly-Clark. The setup created confusion and curiosity in the audience, making them wonder why they needed to mourn and for whom. This feeling of suspense is essential. It's like riding a roller coaster. When you slowly reach the peak and stop for a moment, you realize that something big is coming. Then, bang! You deliver the punchline, and laughter follows. David says that creating suspense is not that difficult. In a speech, you can usually achieve it with a short pause. Remember, the basic structure of a joke is setup plus punchline. Think back to the jokes that made you laugh, most of them probably fit this structure. You can also use more advanced techniques to make your jokes a thread throughout the speech, creating a continuous flow of laughter. This is what we call running gags or continuous punchlines. By expanding on the original story and using twists and other methods, you can further surprise and delight the audience. Humor in a speech is not a matter of spontaneous inspiration, it is a deliberate effect. Many people may share the same misconception as I did, believing that humor is innate. David's truth is that among stand-up comedians, there aren't many naturally funny people. Humor skills require practice. Of all the practices, writing is the most important. This leads us to the third principle for offstage preparation: humor is written. The key here is to simulate the process of how you will deliver the lines on stage while writing. You have to be conscious that what you are writing is dialogue, not a narrative. You are the character in the drama, and the live speech is the stage. You must try to connect with the audience as much as possible, feel their emotions, and anticipate their reactions. David provides many concrete suggestions for this, such as addressing hot topics that the audience cares about. One of his own strategies is to use self-disclosure and tell the audience that he is Irish. He found that audiences would wonder about his accent, so why not address their curiosity directly? This became his label, and in the world of stand-up comedy, everyone called him Irish David. Remember, it takes 10 years of hard work off stage for every minute on stage, and if you want to make a living from stand-up comedy, you need at least 7 years of diligent practice. Each minute of performance requires 22 hours of preparation. So, make sure to prepare well before going on stage. Do you remember the 3 principles we talked about? Humor in the story, humor requires skill, and humor is written. Well, you've put in the effort off stage, and now you're ready to face the final challenge, delivering your speech on stage. Let's talk about the principles you need to remember for the 1 minute on stage in the second part. Before officially going on stage, there is one more thing you need to do, which is rehearsal. This is David's 4th principle: humor requires rehearsal. Rehearsal not only helps polish your jokes to make them funnier but also gives you more confidence. It addresses 2 pain points of public speaking: forgetting lines and stage fright. The methods to deal with them are rehearsing in your mind and rehearsing in reality. You may have experienced situations where you are well prepared, but still get nervous on stage. From now on, you won't have to worry about this issue if you remember a practical tip from David, the memory supply method. In simple terms, you create a rehearsal in your mind, imagining the process of your speech as entering a house. As soon as you step through the front door, your speech begins. In the hallway, you crack the first joke, and in the living room, you present the first point. Treat each room as a critical checkpoint and place your points and jokes inside these checkpoints. This way, when you step on stage, you only need to retrace the path you have rehearsed countless times in your mind. Using this method, David has never forgotten his lines on stage. I tried it myself at department meetings, and it works effectively. However, forgetting lines is not the most terrifying aspect of public speaking. The most challenging obstacle to overcome is transitioning on stage. You may have the same feeling as I do, that polishing the script and rehearsing repeatedly are not that difficult. But as soon as you have to speak in front of a crowd, you start sweating, stammering, and trembling. Going on stage is genuinely terrifying. For me, the most significant benefit of this book is that it made me understand one thing: since stage fright is a physiological response, the best way is to accept it. Acknowledge that these physiological reactions are unavoidable and normal. What you can do is take a few deep breaths before going on stage or wear dark-colored clothes to hide sweat stains. Of course, to completely overcome the problem, you need to prepare more in reality, envisioning all possible scenarios and being fully prepared. This also aligns with the classic cheat principle that proper planning can avoid poor performance. If you still experience stage fright, it can only mean that you haven't prepared enough. The ideal rehearsal place is undoubtedly the actual stage, but repeatedly rehearsing in a live setting may be challenging. David offers a method called the bar test. In simple terms, seize any opportunity for public speaking, try out your jokes, and see how they work. Now that you are fully prepared, you can take the stage. Before going on stage, David has prepared a quick fix kit for the field. This kit consists of two principles: handling the unexpected and controlling the audience, which are the fifth and sixth principles. No matter how well prepared you are, the live setting will be full of unknowns and uncertainties. That's the frightening part of the live performance, but it's also its charm. To reduce fear and enjoy the pleasure that the unknown and uncertainties bring, you just need to remember one thing: be aware that you are in the moment. Don't think that this statement sounds like a cliché. You can use it as a mantra to help you switch states, from your daily self to your performing self. This is supported by comedy theory, which calls recognizing the obvious things as handling the unexpected. Acknowledge that you are in the moment, and all you have to do is feel the audience. What do they want to hear? What is happening in the room? You can even directly state these things to make your speech more interactive. Remember, a speech is not a monologue. Its success or failure depends on the audience's reaction. Therefore, you need to control the audience. The live setting is magical. Even though the audience doesn't know each other, once they are at the scene, they seem to become one person. Just imagine the audience cheering in unison at a live event. They seem to be in sync. It's quite miraculous. To control the audience, you must get them all into the setting you designed. When you watch a play, as soon as the curtains rise, the spotlight immediately turns on the stage, and your attention naturally focuses there. The light is indicating that the show is about to begin. When all the audience's attention is focused on one point, the setting is formed. Stand-up comedy or speeches may not have dimming lights, so what can you do? David uses a simple method. He tells everyone, "If you can hear me, please applaud." This unified action focuses everyone's attention on one point. That's how the setting he desires is formed. Building the setting is the key to the success of your performance, so your speech needs a warm-up. David says that in the first 30 seconds, you must quickly grab the audience's attention, tell them who you are, why they should listen to you, and try to make them like you. The difference in the effect can be significant based on whether your warm-up is done well or not. David once told the same jokes for 2 nights, and the effect was completely different. The one with a poor effect was because he messed up the first 30 seconds. Okay, now you can proceed with your performance. David provides many specific suggestions on how to control your voice and where to stand on stage. I won't list them all here, but I'll remind you of one thing: always summarize, and don't end your speech in a Q&A format. Because in that case, the audience might think you didn't clarify anything. Lastly, there's one principle called eternal debugging. David says that professionals not only review their performance but also repeatedly review it. To overcome embarrassment, you have to keep a certain detachment and see yourself as an evaluator. Professional stand-up comedians evaluate each of their performances. They have a scoring system where they give points to their performance based on the effect in the live setting. For example, if everyone laughs and applauds, they get 5 points. Then, based on the score, they debug the script, the voice, and various aspects. The content you see, including movies, ads, stand-up comedy, has all undergone repeated debugging and structural adjustments. At the beginning, I mentioned that I had a confusion about David's 7 principles, except for the second one. The others seem unrelated to becoming an interesting person. But after asking several professionals, they all responded that the misunderstanding arises because we associate interesting with being funny. In reality, being interesting is a comprehensive concept. It's about the overall impression you leave on others. You might have experienced a situation at a gathering where something happened, and you laughed until your stomach hurt. But when you retold it to others, they didn't seem to get your point. Don't be too concerned, it's not entirely due to your expression skills. Humor is like salt, if you don't sprinkle it into the soup, it remains bland. In this book, interesting is almost equivalent to humor. Comedy is the underlying discipline behind humor, and stand-up comedy is a branch of comedy. It's like learning to swim. Stand-up comedy is just one swimming style, such as the breaststroke. Swimming also has backstroke, freestyle, and more. Similarly, in comedy, there are also pantomime and clown performances, all with different expression styles. Purely being funny is not systematic, you can understand it as a doggy paddle. It's not a professional swimming style, and there's no theoretical support behind it. Therefore, the views of these professionals align with the author. They believe that humor can be learned, and there are techniques to being funny. There are even formulas for jokes. However, I still have some concerns. Can we really master humor by learning just 1 or 2 formulas? Humor is not just an expression skill, it's also a way of thinking. I've been puzzled because I only considered humor as an expressive ability, focusing on the formulas. In reality, the thinking style behind it is more critical. This book may be somewhat focused on ability, and of course, it's not perfect. The essence of humor lies in using a unique and interesting perspective to view your life, seeing the truth and pain, and then recognizing the absurdity of reality. Wittgenstein said that jokes are clarifying gazes at situations. True humor comes from insight, and someone with more insights is undoubtedly an interesting person. So, after listening to this book, if you can remember just one sentence, it's not funny equals setting up punchlines, but humor equals tragedy plus time. An unpleasant experience becomes funny over time. Why does public speaking require humor? David says it's because of the brain's preference for interesting things. If we delve deeper, it's because humor comes from human nature. Alright, how to become an interesting speaker, we have completed this book. The author David is a stand-up comedian, and he shares his insights from going through the experience of overcoming stage fright and becoming a skilled stand-up performer. This book will first give you confidence that talent belongs to a very few people and is unattainable, while experience is a priceless treasure for each of us. Through training, you can also become an interesting speaker like him. In this book, 7 principles for making speeches more interesting are discussed. Let's review them briefly. 3 points for preparation off stage: humor and storytelling. Humor requires technique, and humor is crafted. 3 points for on-stage performance. Humor requires rehearsal, handling the unexpected, and controlling the audience. Lastly, don't forget to keep debugging. At the end of the book, David lists 80 tips. He practically presents all his training experiences to us. So, this book is practical and sincere. However, don't forget that knowledge and skills are 2 different concepts, just like learning to swim. Even if you understand all the knowledge about swimming, it's useless if you haven't been in the water. So, I'll leave you with a practice question. Please use the techniques you've learned in this episode and share an interesting story with everyone. Well, that's the entire content of this episode. Congratulations, you've completed another book. Thank you all for listening to Tim Booker Channel. Please subscribe to the Tim Booker Channel, like the video, and share this valuable knowledge with your friends. Let's combine wisdom with practice, achieve our financial goals, and create a better future together. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.